What's up guys, and welcome back to the garage and to a bit of an unplanned video this one. We're just in the garage to change the brake pads on the Ranger and kind of thought you guys might be interested in seeing the procedure if you've got a Ranger similar or you just want to see what the process looks like for changing brake pads. So I brought my resident brake expert along to help out today.
Yeah, I've had my fair share of brake pad changes just with my old car that I used to race. So yeah, always changing out brake pads to and from road and track sets. Yeah, so I'm definitely not an expert by any means in terms of like every car, but brake pads are really simple to change out.
So been down to Super Jeep Auto this morning to take advantage of their Easter long weekend sales. And, did a bit of shopping, definitely, but also picked up these Bendix Ultra Extreme brake pads, Ultra Premium brake pads. Just use their online brake pad finder and it kind of showed that these were the ones to go for this particular make and model.
So all you're going to need for this job, it's pretty simple. You just need a jack of some sorts. We're using a trolley jack. You need a jack stand or something to chuck on your car. You can just use a spare tire. It's just to stop it falling on the non-existent wheel or on you. And some screwdrivers, and you'll need a socket set, something to get your tire nuts off. And you'll also need some smaller sockets for the actual brake pad section, which we'll show you.
Yeah, that's about it. We might be using a pressing tool as well, depending on how cooperative they are.
Yes, this is an older car, so when we get in there, it'll make a lot more sense. But
she's a spring chicken.
There might be some parts that are a bit hard to move, but we'll explain that when we get in there.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get this car lifted off, get one of those wheels off, and see what we're in for.
Okay, so we've jacked the car up, we've taken this tyre off, and now it's time for us to actually remove the brake pads from the calipers. So to do that, it's very simple. All we have to do is undo 2 bolts that are holding the caliper onto the rotor. So we've got our 14mm socket, and we're just going to be undoing these 2 little bolts. The first one's at the top here. They shouldn't be too tight, depending on what's been done. They're usually pretty, kind of, I don't know, hand tight. So I'll do the top one, undo that a little bit, and then I'll just do the bottom one. Make sure I break that as well. There you go. So they weren't too tight at all. And then you pull those all the way out. There we go. All right. So with those 2 bolts off, we can literally just lift this caliper off of the rotor. Just being careful, there is a brake line here if you want to show it. This little brake line here is connected. That's where our fluid is. We do not want to bend or snap or stretch this too much. If you're going to be working on it for a while, you can actually cable tie this up out of the way. So we'll pull it off, and it's literally just, if I can get it off, wriggle it off. There we go. So that's our brake caliper. We can see our 2 little pistons here. These are the things I was talking about that will need to be pushed in. This is what the brake fluid sits behind them. When you push your pedal in, it pushes the fluid up to these pistons, which push the pistons up and squeezes your brake pads onto your rotor, stops your car. So, as I was saying, we don't want to put too much weight on this little brake pad here. So you can generally find a little spot for it to sit. Excuse me as I twist it around. There we go. So he's happy to sit there. So we've got our caliper off. Now we can pull these old brake pads off, and it's literally as simple as pulling them out of the little slots on this car. So I'm just going to be really careful not to scratch the rotor. I'm just trying to wedge the brake pad off. There we go. So there's one. Back one quite often just pops off. 2. Nice. You can see how worn they are or aren't. So these are our new ones. So we have a look, so you can see the difference in our thickness. The other thing that you'll find is one of your brake pads, usually only on one of the wheels, will have this little silver bit hanging off of it. That's actually your wear indicator. So you know how when your brakes wear out, they start to squeal? That's because your pad's worn away far enough that this bit of metal is starting to sit against your rotor, and it causes that lovely, horrible screeching sound. That is the indicator that tells you you need to change your brake pads. So our new one has one of those. So we'll just be putting that on as well. I pulled this little one with the silver tab off from the inside of the rotor. So when I put the new ones on, I'll just make sure that that silver bit goes on the inside again. So again, not an expert. I don't know if it really matters, but it's how it was, so it's how I'll put it. Putting our new pads on, it's literally as simple as slotting them back in the way they came off. As I said before, making sure this silver one's gonna go on the inside. Make sure you've got your curved edge. They really only fit one way. So curved edge to curved edge, and these are just gonna slot in, making sure I'm lining up the top and the bottom. And then I just pushed in, might need a bit of wriggling, and there it goes. Sitting nice and flush. You don't want them to be sitting out proud from the rotor, and you don't want them to be digging in either. So these ones have this nice bit of metal that holds them perfectly in place, so we don't have to worry. And then same, my head's gonna be in the way. Yeah. Slot them in. Put that little disc pad on. Beautiful. Okay, the next part is probably the hardest part of this job, and that is to replace this caliper back on. But as I said earlier, these pistons would have slowly been pushing in as that brake pad wore out. So now we actually have to push them back out, because right now this gap between here is actually not wide enough to fit over our new calipers. So if I was to try and put this back on, there is no way in hell I'm going to get that to fit as it is. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to manually push these pistons all the way back in. If you have really nice flexible pistons, you can push them by hand, which these ones are moving, but that's pretty hard, and that's all my strength and I can't be bothered. So that's where it comes in handy to have a screwdriver or something. So you can use a screwdriver, or I've got as a backup a handy clamp, okay, just to kind of push them in, or a press, anything that's going to help you clamp these back so the pistons get pushed back. So I'll try a screwdriver first. So all I'm doing is I'm just going to try and leverage. There's actually two little gaps here at the point where I can stick my screwdriver in, and then I'm just going to try and push back on the piston. Okay, that is pretty much all my strength, and it's not moving, which is not surprising because this is an older car. Okay, so for me that is just proving too hard, so I'm going to flip back to using my clamp, which all I'm going to do is literally clamp it like this, and then I'll wind this piston in. As I'm doing this, I'm going to be pushing this piston back in. It's going to be pushing the brake fluid back through this and back to the reservoir. So I've got another camera up the top to show you guys the difference there, and I'll also be checking just to make sure it's not overflowing. So I'm just going to start winding this clamp in. And as you can see, that piston is slowly moving back in. I'm just doing it slowly because I'm wanting to check as I go. I'll go a bit faster. There we go. Unwind it, and then I do the other side. If I can get my clamp to cooperate. So this piston's a lot harder to get in than the other one. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's just old. And at the top, our brake fluid is just about to overflow, so I'm actually just going to grab a rag quickly, just to stop that brake fluid from getting everywhere. All right, that's about as far in as it'll go. Now all I have to do is slot that back onto my new calipers. Okay, you might just have to be careful. These little metal pieces or plastic pieces or whatever come with the brake pad. Sometimes they tend to kick off. This one's nice and sturdy. This one might want to come off, okay? Sometimes they'll just slip off like this. Okay, so we just want to put those back on. It just provides something for the caliper to press on. So now I'm just going to line it up. This will squish in. So this thing here is quite often out, it's springy. Okay, so you just push that in to get that caliper past it. And there we go. Caliper's back on. So now all we have to do, let's not eat your hair, is put our bolts back in and then tighten them up. Trying to get these little things to line up sometimes is a little tricky, so just wriggle your caliper around until you get it lined up. I like to do the top one first because I find it's harder. But once that's biting, then I can do the bottom one. That's the other thing as well. You'll notice if you have a real close look, there's actually a flat bit on either side. So if you have it sitting sideways, that's actually hitting the caliper. So there'll be this gap. Okay, I don't want that, so I'm just actually going to spin him around until it fits in, and then he can come flush with the caliper mount. Again, you might have to wriggle around a little bit. Are you in? There you are. There we go. In terms of the torque setting, we did look these up. I think it was somewhere around 34 Newton meters.
I think it was 26 to 32.
26 to 32, so that's pretty low. Our torque wrench doesn't even go that low, so I'm just going to do them hand tight up to what they basically were when I undid them. All right, so once they get to the tight point, literally just hand tight. Okay, and that's it. We've now changed our brake pads. Everything's put back in place. Our brake fluid did overflow a tiniest little bit, but that's okay. We just fill that up. And when we pump our brakes back up in a minute, which we'll show you, that brake fluid will actually come back through. So because I've pushed those pistons all the way out, they're currently not pressed back on the brake pads. So your brake pedal will feel really squishy. You'll probably be able to push it straight to the floor with no pressure. Okay, but if you pump it a few times, it'll build that pressure back up through the brake system as those pistons move back into the brake pad. So I'm going to get Daniel to jump in the car now and quickly just pump those up. Before he does that though, I am just going to quickly run my eye over the pads, make sure they look like they're sitting properly, there's nothing askew before we clamp them to where they are. All I'm doing is making sure, it's hard to see, but making sure this little metal plate here is sitting flush with the pad and not sitting down on the rotor here where the screwdriver is, but instead sitting up on that pad. So there's a bit of a gap there, which is perfect, and I'll check the same on the other side. Okay, and that's it. Our first set of brake pads is done. So now all that's left to do is we'll chuck the tyre back on, and then we'll flip around to the other side, quickly do that. Once that's done, we'll then have to see where our brake level's at. If it's still really high, we may have to syringe a tiny bit out just so we can put the lid back on without it going everywhere. And then we'll take it for a test drive.
And just like that, the front brake pads have been replaced on the Ranger, and she should be stopping a lot better than before.
Just stopping in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So massive thanks to Bianca for taking care of that job for me. She's my in-house brake specialist, so
you're more than welcome.
Very grateful for A, showing me, but B, showing you guys as well.
Yeah, so that was my first how-to video, so hopefully it made sense to you guys. Let me know if it was good or bad.
It was my first attempt at getting all the weird camera angles.
But no, honestly, it's a really simple job. It should be, if you don't have a Ranger and you're still looking at doing it, it's usually pretty similar. Like all the cars I've done have been fairly similar, and if I come across something where I'm like, oh, what's that? It's either a quick YouTube or you can just figure it out yourself. It's pretty straightforward. So
yeah.
In saying that, we're going to take this for a quick test drive and make sure that those brakes do work, but everything is set as normal, so it should be happy, and we'll just do a final check of that brake fluid once we've driven it just to make sure it's sitting happy.
Yeah, so if you watch this video, then the brakes were successful.
Yep.
If not, then they weren't successful.
We are dead. But no, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Happy Easter and happy camping.
Absolutely, we'll catch you guys in the next one. And just like that, the front brake
pad.
And just like that, the job is complete. Those brake. What?
Sorry, you just totally gave up on saying brake pad.